I still remember the day I moved into that apartment with Jake. We'd met through mutual friends during our junior year of college, and when we both needed a place for senior year, it seemed like the perfect solution. Jake was the quintessential straight guy, captain of the lacrosse team, always talking about his weekend conquests, and completely oblivious to the fact that I had developed a small crush on him within the first month of living together. But that's how these things go sometimes, right? You can't help who you're attracted to, even when it's the worst possible person. Our apartment was small but comfortable, with a shared living space that forced us to get to know each other quickly. We fell into an easy rhythm. I cooked, he cleaned, and we spent many evenings watching movies or playing video games. There was something about the casual domesticity of it all that made my feelings grow stronger, even though I knew nothing would ever come of them. Jake was straight, after all, and I valued our friendship too much to complicate things. The jacket in question was nothing special to most people, but it meant a lot to me. A vintage leather bomber that I'd saved up for months to buy. It was perfectly broken in, with a soft lining and a fit that seemed tailored specifically for me. I wore it everywhere during the fall and winter months, and it had become something of a signature piece. Jake had commented on it more than once, saying how cool it looked, which always made me smile a little too widely. It happened on a Friday night in October. We'd been hanging out in the apartment, having a few beers and talking about nothing in particular. The weather had turned cold earlier that week, and I'd hung my jacket on the hook by the door when I'd come home from classes. Jake kept glancing at it throughout the evening, and finally, after his third beer, he stood up and walked over to it. "I've always wondered what this would look like on me," he said, taking it off the hook. "You mind if I try it on?" I hesitated for just a moment. The jacket was special to me, yes, but there was also something intimate about the idea of Jake wearing my clothes. "Sure," I said, trying to sound casual. "Go ahead." He slipped his arms into the sleeves, and immediately I could see that it was too small for him. Jake was broader than me across the shoulders, his arms more defined from years of sports. He laughed as he struggled to pull it on completely, the material stretching tight across his back. "Man, how do you even move in this thing?" he asked, twisting his body to try to get comfortable. "It's like a straitjacket." I couldn't help but laugh at the sight of him. "It's not made for guys who spend half their life in the gym," I teased. "Here, let me help you before you tear it." I moved closer, reaching up to adjust the collar and shoulders. That's when it happened. As I tugged on the leather, trying to make it sit better on his frame, Jake put his hands on my waist to steady himself. It was such a casual gesture, something he probably didn't even think about, but it sent a jolt through my entire body. His grip was firm but gentle, his fingers pressing slightly into my sides. "Sorry," he said, noticing my sudden stillness. "Almost lost my balance there. These sleeves are seriously restricting blood flow to my arms." But he didn't move his hands. If anything, they seemed to tighten slightly as I continued adjusting the jacket. We were standing closer than we ever had before, close enough that I could smell the beer on his breath and the faint scent of his cologne. Time seemed to slow down, and I became acutely aware of every point of contact between us, his hands on my waist, my fingers on his shoulders, our knees almost touching. "There," I said, my voice coming out slightly hoarse. That's as good as it's going to get, I think." Jake looked down at himself, then caught his reflection in the mirror hanging on the wall nearby. He turned slightly, examining the fit from different angles. "What do you think? Do I pull it off?" The truth was, he looked good. Too good. The tightness of the jacket emphasized the broadness of his chest and the narrowness of his waist. The color of the leather made his eyes seem even bluer than usual. I swallowed hard. "Yeah," I admitted. "It looks good on you." He grinned, clearly pleased with the compliment. "Maybe I should get one for myself." "Maybe you should," I agreed, taking a step back to create some distance between us. But Jake followed, closing the gap again. "Wait, I think the zipper's stuck," he said, looking down at the front of the jacket where I hadn't even attempted to close it. "Can you help me?" I hesitated, knowing that getting any closer was a bad idea, but unable to come up with a reason to refuse that wouldn't sound strange. "Sure," I said again, reaching for the zipper pull. As I worked on the zipper, Jake's hands returned to my waist, steadier this time, more deliberate. I couldn't look up at his face, focusing instead on the task at hand, trying to ignore the warmth spreading through me at his touch. When the zipper finally gave way and started to move upward, I made the mistake of glancing up. Jake was watching me, his expression unreadable, something different in his eyes than I'd ever seen before. "Thanks," he said softly, his voice lower than usual. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We stood like that for a moment longer than was necessary, his hand still on my waist, my hand still on the zipper of my jacket that was now stretched tight across his chest. The air between us felt charged, heavy with something unsaid. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the moment broke. Jake released me and stepped back, rolling his shoulders uncomfortably. "Man, I don't know how you wear this thing. I can barely move." And just like that, we were back to normal. Or at least, what passed for normal between us. I laughed, the sound a little too high-pitched to my own ears, and helped him take the jacket off. Our fingers brushed in the process, and I wondered if I imagined the slight hesitation in his movements, the way his eyes lingered on mine for just a second too long. The rest of the evening passed without incident. We finished our beers, watched a movie, and eventually said goodnight. But as I lay in bed that night, I couldn't stop replaying those few minutes in my mind. The weight of his hands on my waist, the closeness of our bodies, the look in his eyes that I couldn't quite decipher. Was it possible that Jake had felt something too? Or was I just projecting my own feelings onto a completely innocent interaction? Let me explain why this matters so much to someone in my position. When you're attracted to someone who is, by all accounts, unavailable to you, every interaction becomes a puzzle to solve. Every touch, every glance, every word is analyzed for hidden meaning. It's exhausting, but you can't help it. You look for signs that maybe, just maybe, they might feel the same way. And sometimes, in moments like the one with the jacket, you allow yourself to hope, even when you know it's probably pointless. The next morning, I half expected things to be awkward between us, but Jake greeted me with the same easy smile as always. He was making coffee in the kitchen, wearing just his pajama bottoms, his hair still mussed from sleep. It was a sight I'd grown accustomed to over the months, but that morning it felt different somehow. "Morning," he said, pushing a mug toward me. "Made you some too." "Thanks," I replied, taking the mug and leaning against the counter. "Sleep well?" He nodded, then paused, seeming to consider something. "Hey, about last night." My heart skipped a beat. "What about it?" "Your jacket. I didn't stretch it out or anything, did I? I know it's important to you." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "No, it's fine. It's pretty resilient leather." "Good." He took a sip of his coffee, then added, "It really does look better on you, though. Fits you perfectly." There was something in the way he said it, something in his eyes that made me wonder. But before I could analyze it too deeply, he was moving on, talking about his plans for the day, and the moment was gone. Over the next few weeks, I noticed subtle changes in our interactions. Jake seemed to find more reasons to be in the same room as me, to initiate physical contact, a hand on my shoulder as he passed behind me, sitting closer than necessary on the couch, playfully ruffling my hair when I said something he found amusing. Each touch sent the same jolt through me as his hands on my waist had that night, and I found myself both craving and dreading these moments. One evening, about a month after the jacket incident, we were sitting on the couch watching a movie. It was some action film Jake had chosen, not really my thing, but I was happy just to be there with him. Halfway through, he stretched his arm across the back of the couch, his fingers just barely brushing my shoulder. It was such a classic move that I almost laughed out loud. How many times had I seen this exact scenario in movies? The straight guy who maybe isn't so straight after all, making his move so subtly that he could always deny it if rejected. But this wasn't a movie, and Jake was definitely straight. Wasn't he? I glanced over at him, but he was focused on the screen, seemingly unaware of the effect his casual touch was having on me. I tried to focus on the movie, but all I could think about was the warmth of his arm behind me, the slight pressure of his fingers against my shoulder. "You're not really into this, are you?" Jake asked suddenly, turning to look at me. I blinked, caught off guard. "What? The movie? It's fine." He laughed. "You haven't been paying attention for the last 20 minutes. Your mind is somewhere else entirely." If only he knew how right he was. "Sorry," I said. "Just tired, I guess." Jake studied me for a moment, then reached for the remote and paused the movie. "Can I ask you something?" My heart rate picked up. "Sure." "That night, with your jacket." He began, then paused, seeming to search for the right words. "Did you? I mean, was there something? I don't know how to ask this." I held my breath, afraid to hope, afraid to misinterpret. Just ask, I said softly. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as a sign of nervousness. I've always been with girls. But lately, I've been feeling confused, I guess. And that night, when we were standing so close, I felt something I didn't expect to feel. And I've been wondering if you felt it too, or if I imagined it. The confession hung in the air between us, more significant than either of us could fully comprehend in that moment. I had spent months convincing myself that my feelings were one-sided, that Jake would never see me as anything more than a friend and roommate. And now here he was, telling me that maybe, just maybe, there was something more. I felt it, I admitted finally. I've felt it for a while, actually. But I never thought. You're straight. Jake let out a small laugh. Yeah, that's what I always thought too. But maybe it's not that simple. Maybe it's not about being straight or gay, but about the person. He moved his hand from the back of the couch to my shoulder, a more deliberate touch than before. I turned to face him fully, hardly daring to breathe. So what now? I asked. Jake shrugged, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I don't know. This is all new territory for me. But I'd like to figure it out, if you're willing. In that moment, all the analyzing, all the overthinking, all the careful navigation of boundaries fell away. It wasn't about labels or expectations or what might happen tomorrow. It was just about two people acknowledging a connection that had been building for months, finally giving themselves permission to explore it. I'm willing, I said, and for the first time since I'd known him, I allowed myself to really hope. The jacket still hangs by the door in our apartment. Jake never did buy one for himself, but he borrows mine sometimes, even though the sleeves are still too tight and it stretches across his shoulders. And every time he puts it on, I remember that night. The feel of his hands on my waist, the look in his eyes, the beginning of something neither of us had been looking for, but somehow found anyway. Sometimes the most unexpected moments lead to the most meaningful connections. A borrowed jacket, tight sleeves, hands on a waist, small things that can change everything. Our story is still being written, Jake and I don't know where it will lead. But I'm grateful for that jacket, for his curiosity, for the courage it took for both of us to acknowledge what was happening between us. It's not always easy, navigating this new territory together, but it's real and honest and worth every moment of uncertainty that came before. And in the end, isn't that what we're all looking for? Someone who sees us, really sees us, even when we're trying to hide. Someone who makes us question what we thought we knew about ourselves. Someone who fits into our lives as perfectly as a well-worn jacket, even if the sleeves are a little tight sometimes. Total _char_count, 13,037.